In today's Teardown, we're going to take a look at the website of a fractional COO. Now, maybe if you're like me, you haven't heard the whole fractional concept until recently. Fractional COO, fractional CMO, fractional CTO. Fractional essentially means, from my understanding, that they can work with businesses on kind of a part-time, ongoing, consultative basis. They function in that role, but for companies that are still growing and ramping up and maybe don't need or want a full-time hire, aren't at a place to justify that yet, these people can come in sort of a consulting basis and help steer the ship, get really intimate with the business and guide things from that seat. So for Ryan, we're going to be looking at ryanops.com. And what's going to be really important to understand for someone in this role, the questions someone would naturally have are, okay, what makes you credible? Who do you work with? Do you have examples of results you've been able to achieve with other companies? And what sort of process will you walk me through? What will that look like? What makes you different or special in the way that you approach all of this? So it really is going to need to be proof-based, process-based, and then giving people easy ways to kind of dip their toes in and have a conversation with you. So that's what I'm going to be looking for as we go through. So who's the audience for this page? We're talking founders, executives, and managers at service-based companies. Now, that chain kind of goes down. Founders at the top are kind of closest to the business. Managers are maybe in a larger company, and they might have to convince the founder depending on who they are. So for the sake of this teardown, I'm going to assume that the average person has buying power. They have a lot of say. They can pull the trigger and make the decision. But you can assume that in a situation where that wasn't the case, Ryan would have to work pretty hard to arm that person to sell into their boss and say, this person is right. So he might want to have some resources put together, case studies he could help them pass on, things like a process sheet, a print off, a video, things they could easily pass along to get someone else excited about Ryan too. What makes Ryan the best at being a fractional COO for these service-based companies? He has over a decade of experience in leading ops at service-based companies, and he takes a unique approach. So he tries to give teams as much autonomy as realistically possible so they can do their best work. So what Ryan has to do in this page and what we'll be watching for is convince people that that's valuable, explain a little bit about how that looks, and then hopefully support the efficacy of that approach with some social proof, some testimonials speaking to how good his approach was, some case studies showing some results of his work. At very least, we're going to want to see some logos, examples of companies that he's helped to grow, but it really is, for me, going to be all about the story. The process is one thing, but couching that in a story that tells how it looked and what happened and how the people responded and what ultimately resulted from it. I think that's going to be really powerful sales assets for Ryan to have. How do people find this page? So he hasn't focused on the site in a couple of years, and he just redesigned it and started writing posts again. So probably a good sign that up until now, he was really busy. When it was more active, it was from referral traffic and social channels, primarily Twitter and LinkedIn. What I have to assume, and this could be wrong, but for Twitter and LinkedIn, I'm going to assume that people are coming in based on something Ryan has shared. Maybe he has solved problems in public. He's been talking about his approach, or maybe he's been kind of talking about how to do this well or making connections there. I don't have full visibility into that, but I'm going to assume they know at least a little bit about who Ryan is and something attracted them about something he said or shared or taught. And referral traffic is really hard to unpack because that could be from anywhere. So awareness level is really critical to pin down for your site, especially if you're a consultant or freelancer. If a whole lot of people are coming off of, you talking about your approach, your process, or your work, you're going to want to connect the dots for them really quickly. If people have never heard of you, then you're going to have to work that much harder to introduce yourself, share what your process is, and so on and so forth. So you're going to have to really give them a lot to chew on, lots of samples, lots of things to think about, lots of case studies, and so on to help them make an educated decision and get up to speed on you and what makes you special. Is there anything else I should know that would help me evaluate this page? Nada. So without further ado, let's dive in. Now, what we're going to see on this page, a couple of things are an example of where design can get in the way of otherwise strong copy. We're going to ask the question, do you actually need a nav bar? I think there are some situations where maybe you don't, and others where not having it can hurt you. And then we're going to look at, again, this social proof case study component and storytelling. How can we do that really, really well to communicate who this is for, why it's valuable, and how it looks in practice? So let's dive into ryanops.com. So the first thing we see when we land is this big headline. It says, in a services-based company, your team is your product. Now, that's an interesting statement. It kind of immediately puts Ryan's philosophy out there, but I'm not totally sure that this is the right headline for Ryan to be leading with. I would like to see something benefit or pain-based here. What I do like about this headline is it immediately identifies a services-based company, but I feel like services-based, there's room for it to get even more specific. What types of services? I would rework this maybe to try and hook people in. Now, this could be, granted, I don't know the market as well as Ryan does. This could be sort of a revolutionary statement or a flag planting statement where people are sitting up and going, oh yeah. But for me, I think just punching and getting straight to the point would be more powerful. So Ryan Ops acts as a fractional COO that helps companies bring the focus back to their team. I'm dedicated to giving you the tools to support their performance, empower them to make decisions, and ultimately exceed client expectations. So I like a lot of what's here. The fact that it's a fractional COO is stated. The idea of bringing the focus back to the team, though, the thing that is sort of missing for me is the big why. You've introduced this big idea of your team is your product. I would have loved to see a statement that ties that into, we'll make sure your team is damn good. Empower them to make decisions and ultimately exceed client expectations kind of does that, but because it's tacked on to the end of the sentence, it loses a little bit of punch. So I could even see, even if he rolled with the same headline, changing this up to immediately lead with Ryan Ops' job is to, make sure your team is the best it possibly can be, and then talk about the how in terms of fractional COO. And then we've got book a free consultation. Now, when I push this, I'm taken to a field with Ryan Zeman. I hope you won't mind me sharing this, but it pushes me right here. The problem with this is that this is so open-ended, I don't really know what to put in here. I'm booking a free consult, but do I ask about his time or availability? Do I share what I'd like to talk about? Do I talk about who referred me? It's so blank slate that I'm not really sure how to respond here. So I would sooner see a form that just captures the basic information, takes the thinking out of it for me so I can plop things in, maybe even just a direct scheduling link so that I can choose a time that's convenient for me. So I would test an alternative here. The other thing that's not really communicated is what's going to come out of this consultation. I would almost sooner soften the language here, unless you're getting too many leads, and make this more about having a conversation or more about finding out if we're a fit. That feels a little less intimidating for me as someone who's considering hiring you. And I think ultimately that's what's really important is, are we a fit? Do I believe that you are the right person to step into this role? And I'm not sure consultation does that. So then we have featured in all these different places that Ryan has been featured in. And I think that's fine, but I'm less interested in maybe where you've been featured and more interested in who you've worked with. I want to see results right away. I want to see logos, examples that I can kind of gauge. Is this the type of company I fall into? And then something to kind of create excitement in me. Some quick case studies, some quick hits. This is a place where, some metrics here, like how much revenue growth or efficiency growth each company achieved, would really get me stoked up and say, okay, Ryan's legit. I'm really excited to keep on digging. The other thing I want to pause and notice here is that there's not a whole lot of a nav here. My only options are to scroll down the homepage or head to the blog. And this is a problem for me because there's a couple key pieces of information that I really want to get about Ryan. And that is, who is he and what has he done? What results? And by giving me some short links here, even if they just jump down the page, I feel like that would be really powerful and give me a sense of control. As it stands, I'm kind of pushed from sort of this headline here right into services. And I'm not, yes, I want to understand kind of the services, but I already understand the category as fractional COO. So who you are and what you've done is almost more important to me. So I would test an iteration where there is a nav that allows me to quickly explore about you and even talks about results. Now, this is where I want to pause and talk about how design can inhibit cognition when it comes to copy. One of the most common mistakes is just centering all of the text. And as you can see, it kind of makes it feel really long. This isn't a whole lot of copy, but because it's displayed along the middle like this, mentally, it feels like a lot to digest. I would sooner see this left anchored or even have your headline anchored, but this text pulled off to the left and an image on the side. There's a reason we kind of see these left, right, or right, left hero sections. And that's because when you have this much copy centered, it starts to feel like a lot to process. So I think I would try to maybe rejig this or condense it a little bit, even if that makes it a tiny little bit longer feeling, or, add a quick space. So you could have, end the sentence at team, hit enter, but it just feels long. Here too, we've got these different services, but notice how packed together they feel. This isn't, again, it's not a ton of copy, but because it's centered like this, and because there's 3 packed all together like this, it feels like a lot. So my brain goes consulting services, and then whoa, okay, there's a whole lot. It starts to all kind of bleed together. So here too, I would look to maybe scale down the amount of copy. You could potentially offer links off to more internal pages where this is kind of spelled out in more detail. And I could see these internal pages talking about what it is, who it's for, what the process looks like, and having testimonials and proof for each different ones, of each different service you have here. So, sometimes, especially when I'm about to make a decision on a service, yes, you want me to talk to you and learn a bit more, but I do think sub pages here could be enticing, especially to function as primary sales pages. And then over time, you could even drive ads there or link off to them when the situation is right for a client and they're interested in just one thing. I think you could create dedicated resources. So I try to reduce the copy here. Again, change those parameters just so it doesn't feel like this big centered mass of text. Then same thing when we get into testimonials. So I know Mike Arneson, I like him a lot. And for that reason, I would read this testimonial. But I want to offer some other ways of thinking about testimonials here. So I think I've shown this example a few times. Yes, we want this level of detail because the font is small and italicized and really stretched out, and because these headline images are really small, I have to be really dedicated to read this testimonial. I have to be really interested. It feels quite heavy. So a couple things you can do with testimonials to help with this. I've shown this example a few times, but I'm a big fan of highlighting the most pertinent part of the testimonial so that the eyes are drawn right there. It acts as a hook. Someone can dig into that, and if they're interested, read the rest. And I like making testimonials big and chunky, cutting out anything that's superfluous, or even pushing to read the whole testimonial if the hero hooks me and grabs my attention. I also want to show just when you have a lot of testimonials. So here's Veronis. They have this Gartner Peer Insights, and I refer to this page a lot for people too. Transparently, this is something that I worked on. But a couple things. When you have a lot of testimonials, what you can do is you can categorize them. So what do real customers like about Veronis? Responsive and knowledgeable support. And then they have 2 testimonials that are all about the responsive and knowledgeable support. And then time savings and efficiency, 2 testimonials that are about time savings and efficiency. Categorizing your testimonials in this way gives people the gist of what people like about you and then some proof to follow it up. But the other thing I want you to notice here is that there is a headline for the testimonial. So when you have a testimonial that's a little longer, you can give it a headline like this: a solution you will not regret, period. And then quotation marks, bold it, make it a little bigger. And then 10 days after initial installation, we experienced a drive-by ransomware encounter, Now, I would probably still continue having quotes here just to make it obvious that it is a quote, or I'd try to have a headshot. I know in this case, no headshots exist because these were taken from G2 or somewhere like that. And then there's the push to the full review as well. If it exists on another platform that just anchors and says, hey, that we didn't make this thing up. So you can go read the entire thing. But I'm a big fan of highlights, headlines, quotation marks, making these things really easy to consume. So taking it back here, I think we need to try to make this a little easier to consume. And I think we could do something a little bit more creative than just testimonials. But the thing that's missing for me, I'm going to cheat and jump ahead. There are no case studies. Now, I'm not just saying this because I run a case study company. Obviously, I would love to work with Ryan or anyone at Case Study Buddy, but the big thing here is there's no section here about that process that makes Ryan really unique. There's no section I can read here that helps me understand what this might look like and what the steps might be and what comes next, and most importantly, what the big results will be. If those are in these, they're pretty buried. I would like to see metrics-based results. I'd like to see relationship-based results. So if I was Ryan, I'd be going back to Layla or Leela, apologies if I got that name wrong, and Megan saying, could we do a full-blown customer success story here that talked about the steps we went through and what that looked like? I think case studies are an asset here that could be easily passed on, floated up to management, CEOs, founders, and so on. That would help with buy-in there. And they'd also give you a chance to really demonstrate your process in process. People say I say those words weird, but your process and process, your process and process, however you choose to say it, it's a chance to put some story and to communicate how you have relationships with customers and what those look like. Then we get to about me, and here I would love to see a headshot. I'd like to get a sense of who you are and have something to look at and really check out. And then I have over a decade of experience building businesses from the ground up, serving B2B and B2C clients. Here I would have loved to see you reaffirm the types of clients beyond just B2B, B2C. I would have loved to see you kind of just dial into service-based and give some examples. And leading cross-functional teams through international reorganizations. I started Ryan Ops in 2017 as a blog because I noticed that agency founders and executives were looking for tools and resources on how to improve their operations, but that information was hard to find. I wanted to help with that, and it quickly grew into consultancy that specialized in marketing agency operations. And that's all fine, but I'm not getting the insight that I want here, and that's your process, your proof, how you work with people, examples of what you've achieved. I like the story that it started as a blog, but do I want a blogger running my COO business? That's the question that I need you to help me transition out of. As a leader, you want to focus on the big picture, and sometimes it seems impossible to remove yourself from the day-to-day. Today, I partner with service-based companies, so finally, there it is, as a fractional COO to do one thing: empower team members to exceed client expectations by giving them the autonomy, training, and communication skills they need to succeed. I like that summary statement, but I'd want more about the how. And again, more about the examples. And, tying it back into, you help me escape the day-to-day so I can zero in on the other parts of the company that are my best fit. I can get out of the weeds and into the tower. I can start directing instead of, gardening. So I think there's more that can be done there. And then we have insights. So how to increase client renewal, 5 ways to improve your sales handoff, turning vanity metrics into actionable metrics. Interested in working together, have a topic you'd like explored in a blog post. I wouldn't group those two things together because it's two very different people between I'd like you to explore this and I'd like to actually hire you. I would plant a flag and choose just one of those things and maybe have the explored in a blog post call to action in the actual blog posts. One thing I'm really surprised to see is there is no opt-in here. There's no resource I can download. Now, maybe if we click through to the read more, maybe, Ryan is having some content-based lead magnets. Okay, he doesn't. So for someone who's published so much and is so talented, and there we see a headshot. Awesome. I would love to see you use, what are some of the most common questions you get asked about, and then build a lead magnet out of that. Now, I'm terrible for this too, but having some sort of downloadable or something that indicates they have a particular problem you can solve, that would be kind of a way to get people to get on your email list, coming back to your blog, building up this big base of people that you can reach out to over time via email, continue to educate them, and then when they reach a point they're ready to hire you, I could see that being tremendously valuable. So I think there's a huge missed opportunity on the content marketing front here. You're blogging a lot, you're putting in a ton of effort, but hey, secure that email. Secure that email with a lead magnet that's valuable to me as a service-based business. So the other thing I'll say too is the way this blog is presented also makes it intimidating to read. Something about the spacing and the width here and these big paragraphs. I think just hitting the enter button a few more times would make this a little bit easier to digest, even just spaces between paragraphs like this. So adding a space between these, I think would be tremendous because it starts to bleed together into one big wall. So some more spacing here, some simple design stuff would help with cognition, help people get through your pieces more, and ultimately contact you. So this has gone almost double the length of my hope, which is 10-minute teardowns, which I've never hit. It's always been longer than that. But I hope you found this valuable. And do you need a nav? I think in most cases, yes. It's the benefit is helping people jump straight to the parts that are interesting for them. Where might you not need a nav? In situations where you want them to read every section sequentially because and you're very, very confident you're serving up the information in the order I need it on things like a particular sales page. So it's not always necessary, but in a case like this, I think it would be really, really helpful. So Hope you guys enjoyed this. If you have a site you want me to tear down, feel free to fill out the form. There's a link in the comments, and you can suggest something, and I might just take a look at it like this one. Have a great rest of your day and a great week to come.